Welcome to the Zerto 3.5 overview. Building blocks for this release include field issues and fixes, contacting Zerto support right from the GUI, so you can open a ticket from the GUI, tolerant failover, so it won't fail on innocuous types of problems with VM starting, GUI enhancements, new VPG status, vSAN support, that's a big one, and data store management view. And then we have a whole suite of action APIs that we're including, along with the reporting that already exists. The task view enhancements, so you've got a better view of certain tasks going on. Data store cluster support in VC environment. API gaps, we continue to fill those with each release. Change data store to use storage vMotion. Alerts notification enhancements. And offsite backup, and that is the big one. So let's start with the big one. What is offsite backup? So the word paradigm, particularly in marketing, gets overused to the point that it's just a buzzword or jargon. But in this case, it really does fit the description of what this product is bringing to the table, because it's a new way to do data protection. You're extending it past the 5-day journal that Zerto has, and we're leveraging your existing Zerto environment. So you're combining replication, continuous data protection, with long-term retention at the target site. So you can extend past that recovery time of the 5 days in the journal to daily, weekly, and up to monthly backups, and those can be extended out to a full year. So that's why the first bullet point here is it does not replace traditional backup. It's just something completely different. Starting with the foundation of Zerto Virtual Replication, we've already achieved the lowest RPOs and RTOs you're normally going to find in disaster recovery. But what we want to do is increase the usefulness of the information at the target site. The data is already there, so what we wanted to do was add in backup operations to protect entire virtual protection groups, much in the same way that we do it for the DR. This also allows you to increase the efficiency of both your production and your target sites. So at the production site, there's certain backup workloads that you can offload to the offsite backup operations that Zerto offers, where you can increase the productivity of the recovery site by taking the data that's already there and creating a package that protects entire virtual protection groups to where you can restore them up to a year later using a restore operation, much like a failover or a move operation. When you create an offsite backup, a package is created that includes the config files, the application, and the data to make it portable. It can be stored anywhere, including public clouds. Zerto Offsite Backup allows you to simplify your data protection into one solution. You can essentially manage and control your backup and disaster recovery operations using one interface. Zerto Offsite Backup brings a lot of new ideas and capability and options to the table. However, there's several things it's not, and we want to be clear on what it does and what it doesn't do. Zerto Offsite Backup is not a full backup product. You're not able to recover single files. It doesn't do deduplication, and it's not an archiving product. It's not intended for that market, and it's not intended for that purpose. What it does do is protect virtual protection groups in a whole new way. Zerto Offsite Backup introduces new capability that you didn't have before for data protection. For compliance, some data has to be retained over a long period of time. You may find that Zerto Offsite Backup is the perfect solution to meet not only your data protection of DR, but for regulatory compliance. Having more options for how to protect the data is a powerful thing. So you're able to go DR to the cloud and have a retention in there somewhere too, to where you can store the Zerto Offsite Backup packages in either a third site, a local site, a cloud site, maybe on your own cheaper storage off-site. There's a lot of combinations of how and where you place that data, and you keep it protected. There are many benefits to using Zerto Offsite Backup. You essentially simplify your data protection For both disaster recovery and your backup, it's all in one solution. So you've got one interface, you've got one thing to manage. You streamline management with configurable backups. So you can go weekly, you can go daily, you can go monthly, and it extends out to a year where you can use a restore operation the same way you do a failover or move operation. By offloading the backup operations to the target site, to the recovery site, the production site has lower impact. There's no snapshots affecting the storage, and there's no additional backup networks taking bandwidth away from the production environment. Zerto Offsite Backup introduces a whole new idea on how to restore and recover data. It uses all of the work you did for DR planning and getting the virtual machines into the virtual protection groups that you need, and it packages up where the virtual machines are all intact, the data is intact, the configurations are intact, and it can be saved anywhere, including public clouds. The Zerto Offsite Backup packages have the capability of even living past the Zerto Virtual Manager that created it. So if the ZVM is completely unavailable, the Offsite Backup package has the information it needs to be restored to any Zerto Virtual Manager. Now let's look at the architecture of Zerto Offsite Backup. So the first thing you'll notice is there's no re-architecture going on with the Zerto Offsite Backup. The only new addition is a service that runs on the Zerto Virtual Manager called the Zerto Virtual Backup Appliance. It works in vCenter or vCloud Directory environments. You can use different data repositories, either local storage or SMB shares, to the Zerto Virtual Manager. Let's look at this in production. We have two sites, one in the background, one in the foreground. We're looking at the Zerto portion of the vSphere inventory. And if we look at the Zerto tab, we have two new subtabs there. We have Setup and Offsite Backup. That's where we're going to do the operations for Offsite Backup. We'll set it up, and then we'll manage the Offsite Backups from those tabs in a very familiar, intuitive interface. So let's go to the Setup tab, and we'll see that we can manage our VRAs there. We have Data Store view also of all the data stores presented. And then we have our repositories. Now let's zoom in on the replication site to look at some details. We see that the Zerto Virtual Backup Appliance runs as a service in the Zerto Virtual Manager at the recovery site. When Offsite Backup is configured for a VPG, the Zerto Backup Appliance initiates an image of the volumes on each VRA. Then the Zerto Backup Appliance tracks the volumes, VPGs, and VRAs to ensure the correct backups are occurring. On the Zerto Virtual Manager server where the Zerto Backup Appliance is running, the Zerto Offsite Backup packages can be stored locally or via a network share. To keep the management intuitive and simple, the Offsite Backups are all configured and managed through the Virtual Protection Group screen. The Offsite Backup packages are very portable. They can be stored locally at the recovery site or at another site, including third-party sites, such as public clouds. The Zerto Backup packages can be restored back to the originating Zerto Virtual Manager that created them, but they can also be restored to a Zerto Virtual Manager server that is brand new. Now we'll add a repository that Zerto Offsite Backup can use. It's very intuitive and easy to create by just giving it a name and providing it the path to the share and user credentials. Looking deeper into the package contents of the Zerto Backup package, we see that the Zerto Backup package has the metadata that allows an original or non-original Zerto Virtual Manager to restore it, VPG and checkpoint time, the VPG configuration file that contains the VPG data, and the VM configuration and storage volumes for each VM in the VPG. Let's look at a real Zerto Backup package. Here are several backups that have been scheduled. Let's break one open. And there are the configuration files, as we talked about, for the entire VPG for the package. And then we go into each individual virtual machine, has the VM contents, and then the actual data. and we have a couple of VMs in this package, one Linux, one Windows. In order to create the backup package, we use the familiar VPG creation screen. Here we see some new policies for extended recovery, scheduling, and repositories. From here you can manage disaster recovery and backup operations per VPG. You can easily select target repositories for the backups, configure the retention period based on business needs, and control backup job start times. Okay, let's create a VPG and configure it for Offsite Backup. So first thing we'll do is give it a name. And we'll see the recovery policy has some new options. One of the options is extended recovery, and that gives us the backup properties submenu. Let's go over and do the host, data store, our move, and our test networks just as normal, and our folder. Now, let's look at the repository name that we're going to use. And there's the scheduler. We can schedule this for weekly or daily and when we want to do it. And there's the backup window that I can exclude certain times if I don't want backups to be running during certain hours. I can make those changes. Very easy to drag in chains of conditions. Now I'm going to change this to a daily backup, and I'm going to set it at 1 and hit save. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out a couple of VMs to put in this backup. Hit OK. Now they're added. And then I'll save the backup. But as you can see, it's the same interface, it's intuitive, and you're now managing both DR and Offsite Backup with one tool. With Offsite Backup, you can manage your backups with one application essentially. You've got a simple management view. You can see the operations, you can see the source site to the target site, the status of the current backups, and also the start time, end time of the next backup jobs. From the same interface, you can fully monitor the backup status. You can look at the number of the restore points that you have, the repository, and the backup path. So you not only get your disaster recovery status, you also get your backup status from one interface. So to summarize, the Offsite Backup capabilities allows you to extend past that 5-day point-in-time journal, and it allows you to use a familiar interface to configure the backups, to schedule the backups, to configure the repositories, to be able to manage the VPGs, and extending their life past even the ZVM that is managing and created them. Also at the site level, you can configure daily and weekly email reports to get a status of all of your offsite backups. We've also focused on alert and notification enhancements. Things such as probable causes and solutions are linked right into the GUI, and you can have improved communication regarding the new versions, so you're going to see that earlier. You'll see the severity of the messages and consolidation of redundant messages to make the most important ones float up to the top where you can address them quicker. In order to integrate with existing workflows, portals, etc., we've added action APIs to where you can do essentially complete lifecycle type operations where you can start and commit and roll back failovers, failover testing, create clones. You can do task status updates and more cloud-specific operations such as working with service profiles and Zorgs. You can also provide resources managed by vCenter Server for a specified site. These APIs go along with the reporting APIs that are in previous versions to give a really robust stack of API capability. One of the more immediately noticeable things in 3.5 is the primary and substatus of VPGs. Now you're seeing a more descriptive type of status for the primary, but then there's information below that in the substatus that gives you deeper information from essentially the same footprint on the screen that the former status were taking. The data store view shows you things such as the state and the status, the devices, the consumption that Zerto is using for the data stores, recovery volumes, journal sizes. It's all in there as far as a single place to see all your data store related information. Along with task information, there's now action buttons. Let's take a look at stopping a failover test using the action pane. A great feature to simplify the ticket submitting process is you can now contact Zerto support directly from the GUI. So let's look at how we would create a ticket or a support case for Zerto to be able to respond quicker with the right information. From the GUI, we hit the little gear at the top right and we go down to Support Ticket and fill out the fields. Tolerant failover is the idea that even though some of the VMs in a VPG may not come up in the correct state, it's still okay to go ahead and have a successful failover instead of failing it. An offsite backup wouldn't be very good unless you could do a restore. We have a familiar operation with a restore button right beside the move and the failover buttons. During the restore configuration, you have several options. You can change things such as the MAC address, whether you want the IP to be static or dynamic, DNS settings, and whether you want the VM individually to power on or stay powered off. Looking at the restore operation, it's very intuitive. Hit the restore button, select the repository, and then it's a matter of picking the backup that you want to use and any customization settings that you would like to do to the individual VMs, and you're just selecting the host and location where it's going to go, and then you can do the little edit button and select several options. Once you're complete, then you just save your restore settings. Then you hit the restore. We see the virtual machine start to populate the vCenter inventory. And let's open up the task pane there, that way we can see the task operations. There's the other one. And the VMs are powering on because that was part of our configuration in the workflow of the restore. And that's it. Zerto 3.5 is a significant release. From the operational workflow improvements, the ease of use, the orchestration automation that's there. And then there's Offsite Backup, which is essentially a whole new way to protect data. We thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll be as excited by this version as we are.